replied, Jibreel. When he heard this, he said, this young man is no ordinary young man. Al-Hadi therefore, with his knowledge, helped the local people. You see, after Imam Sadiq, the Banu Abbas knew 6 Imams have come. There's 6 more. And the Mahdi will have a universal government. The only Imam from the 12 Imams whose government won't be in Medina or Kufa, international. Every single planet on this globe, so every single country on this planet, will have one of their Imam's knives, an international government. They want to just in the back of his head. You can imagine how they did that. Normally you pull out someone's Number 2, dua, prayer. You see, if you see someone right now here laughing loudly, you think he's a bit crazy. You take your phone out, start recording him, social media, the likes. If that same man begins to cry, this is a point in mantiq, in logic, what do you think? Why is he crying? You're attracted to him. Anyone on the road, you see a man laughing, you don't approach him. Same man cries, you think, why is he crying? Imam Hadi began to pray for the people, to soften their heart. How? There's one narration where he mentions a man by the name of Abu Hashim. He says, I came to Imam. Imam spoke to me in Hindi, in the language of Al-Hind. I said, Imam, I can only speak Arabic. I can't speak Hindi. Imam said, no problem. You know when you bake bread back then, you baked it on stones. Imam Hadi picked up the stone, put it into his blessed mouth, took it out and said, put this into your mouth now. He said, I put it into my mouth. From that day until I died, I could speak 73 languages, including Hindi. 73 languages from the sadaqah of Imam Hadi. Imagine how many Imam Hadi could speak. Which is why they say when you speak with any Imam, especially for the youth, you could speak any language. Japanese, Chinese, Italian, Spanish, English, whatever. The Imam cannot be the Imam if he can't speak your language. Abu Hashim says, I spoke 73 languages from that day. The Imam's dua. How else did he guide people? A man by the name of Yunus Naqash. Naqash, you can imagine, what does that mean? He was a sculptor, an artist, a professional artist. One day, you saw what Mutawakkil did to Ibn Sakit, pull out his tongue from the back of his head. He said to Yunus Naqash, make for my daughters a sculpture from this stone. So he gave him a gemstone and he said, make a sculpture out of it. Yunus Naqash came to Imam Hadi and says, oh Imam, help me. What's happened? He said, as I was making that design in that stone, the stone fell down and cracked into two. What's going to happen to me now? That stone is worth $1 million or so. How can I go back to him? Imam Hadi raised his hands in dua. He said, go now. Nothing will happen to you. The guard came, there's a special escort from the government. The guard came to collect him, took him to the palace. He's trembling, he's sweating, but he knows Imam Hadi has prayed for me. He goes there. Mutawakkil says, I've changed my mind. He said, you know that gemstone I gave you? My 2 daughters began fighting. So why don't you break it into 2 and make a sculpture each, and I'll pay you more. He said, I'll think about it. You can imagine the smile on his face. He was praying hard to get. I'll think about it. He went back home, went to Imam Hadi. He said, oh Imam, thank you. Your dua saved me, quite literally. This was Imam praying for others. Imagine if you pray for your Imam, what happens? They asked one man, why do you love the Ahlul Bayt so much? He says, I'll tell you why. I came from Isfahan to meet Al-Mutawakkil. I came to ask him for money. There was a drought, there was a famine. We need money, we need crops. Mutawakkil didn't really treat us quite nice. We were standing outside the palace. I heard someone say, make some way, make some way. Why? A man by the name of Ali Al-Hadi is being summoned to the court. Another man said, it seems to me Ali Al-Hadi will be killed today. The special protocol he's been given, he's going to be executed. This man says, I didn't know who Ali Hadi was, who's this young man, until I saw him walking. He said, as he was walking, I looked to his face, I looked to how he was, I was instantly attracted to him. There was a special feeling I got, a special love. I don't know where it came from. In my heart I said, oh Allah, protect this young man. He said, Imam Hadi in front of me had his head down, he's walking past everyone, he stops at me.
I prayed how? In my heart. He stops at me. He looked to me, he smiled and said, Allah has accepted your dua. You prayed for the Imam of your time. Allah has accepted it. In return, Hal jaza ihsan illal ihsan. In return for your dua, Allah will give you many children. Your lineage will never finish. Secondly, you will have a long life. Thirdly, your property, when you go back to Isfahan, will grow. The narrator, this man says, it's been how many years? I am now 70 years plus, and I'm still alive. I have more than 12 children from the barakah of the Imam. And he says, I have at least 1 million silver coins. I've never tasted poverty after that dua. Imagine if you do dua for the Imam of your time. Today, Shab Juma, Allahumma ajjil li waliyika al-faraj. When you pray for them, will they not pray for you? Next time you go for your job in the morning, or you go for your university, or you go for your exam, just say salam to the Imam. Salam is not wajib. The jawab is wajib. When you say salam to these holy personalities, Lady Fatima, Imam Ali, Imam Hussein, will you not hear a jawab? We may not be able to hear it. Your soul will. Be like that man. Fourthly, his Imam Hadi, how did he save the people? Through his speech. One day he was called to the house of Al-Mutawakkil. They shook his whole house up. They brought Imam Hadi. And he said, recite for me some poetry. He was drunk. Now, those of you who are involved in minicabbing and dealing with these people, you know how difficult it is to handle drunk people. If they're drunk, to make them sober takes a long time. Al-Mutawakkil was drunk heavily. He said to Imam Hadi, he had the audacity to say this, have some drink as well, join me, take a glass. Imam Naki said, that liquid has never mixed with my flesh, and it will never mix with my flesh. He said, then recite some poetry for me. Everyone is watching. Recite poetry for me. Imam Hadi said, I don't really recite poetry. He said, you have to now. And I'll give you the summary of this poem. Imam Hadi said, where were those beautiful faces which used to be in the castles? Then the caller said, where have they gone? They have gone down into the holes into the ground. They used to eat, but now a voice cries, they are being eaten. Those beautiful faces, when they digged open the grave, worms were fighting over each other, over which piece of the flesh to eat. And this poem carried on and on and on. They say Al-Mutawakkil cried so much, he became sober again. He woke up. So how did Imam Hadi then spread the religion of Islam? To tell people that what he's doing and the acts are wrong? Through his speeches, through his poetry. And last but not least, the Imam did so by his presence. A lady came to Al-Mutawakkil and said, I am Zainab. Zainab bint Ali. They called Imam Hadi, middle of the night. Imagine someone knocking on your door, your children are sleeping, then kicking the door open, picking you up and taking you for the sake of a few questions. Middle of the night. He said, this lady, I'm not drunk by the way. Al-Mutawakkil said, I'm not drunk. This lady says she's Zainab bint Ali. How do we tell that she's not? Imam Naki looked to her, he said, who are you? Zainab, as in my great grand auntie, that's you. She said, yes. Imam Naki said, if you're really Zainab, there's a cage there with the lions. Go sit in that cage. If you're really the daughter of Ali, those lions will not do nothing to your flesh. She turned around, she said, if you're really Ali Al-Hadi, you go sit in it first. Imam Naki opened the cage, sat down, just by his presence. All of the lions sat by his feet. And the Imam began petting their head. He came out and he said, now it's your turn. She said, I'm not Zainab. After this, Al-Mutawakkil became more jealous. And so they said, stop holding the door open for the Imam. You know, the doors were really heavy. When the Imam comes, don't open the door for him. The curtains, don't open the curtains for him. Just try and embarrass him somehow. We tried with knowledge. We tried with zulm. Nothing's working. So at least now don't give him the special courtesy. A few days later, the governor came. He said, stop doing this now. He said, why? He said, order your men to open the door for him, to remove the curtain for him. He said, but why? He said, since you've given that order, whenever Imam Naki would walk to any door, any curtain, it would open itself. The people are watching this and they're becoming more unified with him. And so we finish with this last point. That's how Imam lived in his time. Couldn't openly give lectures, couldn't give dars. So he set up a system. And the opportunities he did have, he maximized through poetry, through dua, through his presence alone. And we finish with this last point. There was something Imam Hadi had in his heart, which is given to the hearts of everyone. What's that? Ziyarah. What do I mean ziyarah? You see, from Imam Hadi directly, we have some special ziyarats, like Ziyarat Jamia Kabira from Imam Hadi. This ziyarah is so maqbool, so accepted, so pure, you can recite this in any haram. Shah Abdul Azim, Bibi Ma'suma Kum, Imam Hadi, Imam Musa Kadhim, any haram you go to, you can recite this dua, this ziyarah. There was another ziyarah, the ziyarah of Imam Hussein. How? Imam Hadi, whose majlis you've come for today, had a special connection to Imam Hussein. In fact, all of the Imams had a special connection to Imam Hussein. What did Imam Hadi do differently? You see, in the time of Al-Mutawakkil, he was famous for destroying the grave of Imam Hussein up to 6 times. That's the minimum you'll find. Some you find will say 10, 16. Minimum 6 times he demolished the grave of Imam Hussein. Back then there was no gumbat, there was no chandeliers. It was just a normal grave with a cage. Demolished it 6 times. He wouldn't stop there. He would then get water, sprinkle the water all over the grave, and ask the farmers, come and mow this land. Why? So that eventually he thought the grave of Imam Hussein would disappear. The local people reported whenever he would throw water onto the land, it would soak everything. So you know when you have mud and you walk on mud, what happens? It gets onto your shoes. Imagine 100,000 people do this. Eventually that land disappears. They said the water would go everywhere. But it came to a part in Karbala where it made a circle. It wouldn't go any forward. The cows and you could say bulls would come and try and mow the land. They would go everywhere except for that part in Karbala where the grave of Imam Hussein was. Eventually they stopped. But they had no trace of where the grave is. Where's the grave of Imam Hussein? One Sayyid came to that local area and he said, I got down on my knees, I got down on my hands, and I began crawling. And I began smelling each part of the ground. Until I came to one part where it smelt like Jannah. That's when I knew this is the grave of Hussein. Hussein tere lahu ki khushbu falak ke daman se aa rahi hai. Even today, the pure khak-e-shafa, when you smell it, it smells out of this world, so to speak. In the time after Imam Hadi and even before him, the ziyarah of Imam Hussein was blocked. They would say, Imam, they're killing people to go there. What did Imam Hadi say? Still go. Normally when your life's at danger, what do people say? The Imams would say, stay home, except for Hussein. When there's more danger, you get more thawab. Go to Hussein. Why? There you'll find something you can find nowhere else. A lady went in the time of the Banu Abbas. She went to the ziyarah of Imam Hussein. When she got there, the guards stopped her. They said, Bibi, where are you going? She said, to the ziyarah of Hussein. They said, you're an old lady, go home. She said, no, I want to do that ziyarah. They said, if you want to do that ziyarah, it's going to cost you 1 arm. From the elbow, cut. You want to go? Give your arm. She put out her left arm. They said, you know it's meant to be the right. She said, I gave you my right last year. I've come again for his ziyarah. The love for the ziyarah of Imam Hussein. No Imam ever stopped it. People would go in groups of 4 and 5. Like today, mashallah, when you go for ziyarah, you go in a group. For every 4 or 5 people, one would be killed. You want to go as a group, 1 or 2 people stay behind, you'll be killed. And people did it happily. You're going to visit Imam Hussein. I'm going to be killed here for him. I know he'll come visit me. No issue. The ziyarah is there or the ziyarah is here. The time of Imam Hadi, a man came to him and said, I am going to Karbala. From Samara to Karbala. Imam Hadi took a deep sigh. He said, pray for me as well. When you go to the grave, pray for me as well. There is a ha'ir, there's a special gumba near his grave. Now back then there was no dome, there's no gold. So what dome was Imam speaking of? There's a spiritual dome there. No dua made there is rejected by Allah. Imam Hadi saying, pray for me. He said, Yabna Rasulullah, you should be praying for me. You're the Imam of the time, how can I pray for you? He said, you don't understand the power of that grave. Trying to point people towards Imam Hussein. Which is why they say, in the final moments of every Imam, they remembered one person, Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Al-Mu'taz, after Mutawakkil, Lanatullah alayhi, could not take Imam Hadi anymore. So on the 3rd of Rajab, 254 after Hijrah, he gave the Imam some poison. This poison was so strong, the Imam's body began moving. And he came to Imam Askari and said, my son, take my final wasiyah. I'm leaving this world now. One of my wasiyahs is this. Say to my grandson, Al-Mahdi, how I wish I could have met you. But destiny has decided otherwise. In the final moments of Imam Al-Hadi, Imam Hassan Askari is holding him close to his chest. Those of you who've buried your fathers, may Allah bless their soul, who've buried your grandfathers, your uncles, your aunties, anyone from your loved ones, you know those last moments are the most critical. Even today you have memories of it. How did the Ahlul Bayt leave this world? Imam Hadi breathed his last. And Imam Askari was crying, but he could not cry loudly. Why? Because the Banu Abbas are outside. And so he attended the funeral of his father alone. He recited the namaz-e-janazah. He stood there and was giving his own musibah to the Imam. But I would say, oh Imam Hassan al-Askari, at least you could cry for your father. At least you could give him ghusl and you buried him. What did the likes of Imam Sajjad and Bibi Zainab and Bibi Sakina have to go through? Because we find on the 11th of Muharram, Umar Saad gave a call, O horse riders, sharpen the hooves of your horses. Trample the bodies of Hur, of Sa'id, of Habib ibn Mazahir, of these companions. But they all had someone there to protect them. They said, you killed our person, but this humiliation we won't allow. So Umar Asad looked towards the Banu Hashim, trampled the body of Abbas, the body of Qasim, Ali Akbar, On and Muhammad. But they all had someone there from their tribes. They said, oh Umar ibn Asad, you killed our sons, but this we will not allow. So he gave a call, is there anyone here who has no mother, no father to come help him? There was one body on the plains of Karbala. That was the body of Hussein. And so these horse riders began trampling the body of Imam Hussein. It is narrated, it sounded like glass was being broken, but it wasn't glass. It was the flesh and the bones of Imam Hussein being mixed with the haq of Karbala. Those of you who've been to Karbala, you've seen the Qatlgah of Imam Hussein, but you've seen where he's buried. Why is there such a distance? Because that was the distance they kicked the body of Imam Hussein. But I finish with this. On the 12th of Muharram, Imam Sajjad came back to bury his father. He sees the Banu Asad crying and being confused. They would say, there are bodies here without heads. There's bodies without hands and feet. who do we bury where? Imam Sajjad said, I will tell you where to bury these shuhada. Make a grave for all of the shaheeds. Bury them collectively in one grave. Make this separate grave for Habib ibn Mazahir. He holds a special position in the eyes of Allah. Then Imam Sajjad said, O Banu Asad, move back. There's one body which only I can bury. A few moments later, Imam Sajjad came back. He said, O Banu Asad, can you give me a prayer mat? They said, why do you want a musalla? Why do you want a prayer mat? He said, there's so many pieces of my father. I try and pick him up where I can, and I'll bury him what I have. So Imam Sajjad began picking up the pieces of Imam Hussein. He came to the grave. You know that the story is this. Someone is inside the grave to collect the body. Someone stands outside to give him the body. This Ma'soom Imam is standing there. There's no one to go down into the grave. So Imam Sajjad began to cry. Just then, 2 arms of Rasulullah came out. O Sajjad, give me back my Hussein. My heart says Imam Sajjad would have cried, O Rasulullah, I give back your Hussein to you, but this is not the same Hussein you left in Medina. The Hussein you left in Medina had a chest which you would place on your chest. He had a finger, but this Hussein's finger has been cut off. He had his wrists, but this Hussein's wrists have been cut off as well. O Rasulullah, his head, the neck you would kiss, is on the spears of Banu Umayyah in the bazaars of Kufa and Sham. O Rasulullah, this is not the same Hussein you left in Medina. This is not the same Hussein you left in Medina. Allah la'natullahi al-qawmi zalimin wa sayalamu allazina zalamu ayyamun kalabiyan kalibun. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by the right of Imam Al-Hadi, by his sacrifices, by his shahada, to accept our humble offering, to forgive us of our sins, to protect us and our families, to bless the souls of all of our marhumeen, bil khusus bil marhuma Bibi Safdar Begum. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also allow us to do the ziyarah of Imam Al-Hadi and allow us to be with him في الدنيا وفي القبر وفي الآخرة وفي الجنة. For the love of Imam Al-Hadi, can we have a loud salawat? Matame Imam.